A vision goal-setting extravaganza from the Gun Violence Office at the White House.
Biden administration is set to make a major announcement, launching a new office for gun violence prevention.
My cousin was shot and killed by someone who never should have had a gun, whose own family didn't want him to have a gun.
Dynamic. You've got this upbeat music, this hopeful music. You've got amazing lighting. You've got a black environment. It's all about the message.
Thinking about making sure that people in crisis who are a risk to themselves or others don't have access to firearms.
White House launches propaganda video. The White House's recent release of a video to introduce the Office of Gun Violence Prevention has stirred significant controversy and debate. While the video aimed to serve as a means of communicating the goals and objectives of this new office, it has been heavily criticized by those who view it as a form of propaganda. This criticism revolves around concerns regarding the transparency and potential implications for Second Amendment rights in the U.S. The Office of Gun Violence Prevention, a new initiative of the Biden administration, was established with the aim of addressing the pervasive issue of gun violence in the country.
A vision goal-setting extravaganza from the Gun Violence Office at the White House.
Biden administration is set to make a major announcement, launching a new office for gun violence prevention.
And therefore they get their outcomes while manipulating existing law. That's what they've been doing for 3 years.
The White House's decision to release the video for its introduction is in line with modern communication strategies, yet the tone and content of the video have left many with reservations. Critics of the video argue that it fails to address critical concerns that are associated with the new office. They contend that the presentation is overly optimistic and upbeat, with carefully selected lighting and dynamic music that creates an atmosphere of hope. While this approach is intended to engage viewers, it is seen by critics as a distraction from the substantial implications of the office's objectives. The use of euphemistic and vague language in the video is also criticized for obscuring the underlying issues. Key concerns about the office involve potential infringements on Second Amendment rights, especially with regards to red flag laws. The video briefly mentions the prevention of individuals in crisis from accessing firearms, a concept which critics believe aligns with the controversial red flag laws. These laws permit the temporary removal of an individual's firearms if they are considered a risk to themselves or others. Critics argue that this bypasses due process, potentially infringing on individuals' constitutional rights. Furthermore, there is a broader controversy surrounding the integration of gun control organizations with the federal government. The video suggests a merging of these organizations with the White House and the executive branch. This has raised questions about the development and enforcement of gun control policies. Critics worry that such integration could lead to policies that infringe on individual rights and liberties, which has been a contentious issue in the ongoing debate about gun control. Rob Wilcox and the mission of the office. Rob Wilcox, the deputy director of this newly established office, plays a central role in the video and serves as its spokesperson. He articulates the primary objectives of the office and underscores the importance of its mission in addressing the pervasive issue of gun violence in the U.S. Rob Wilcox's prominence in the video highlights his role as a key figure in the leadership of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. As the deputy director, he assumes a position of significant responsibility and is tasked with communicating the goals and strategies of the office to the public. His presence in the video is intended to provide a face and voice for the administration's efforts to combat gun violence, making him a central figure in the debate surrounding this issue.
Yeah, my name is Rob Wilcox, and I'm the Deputy Director of the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention.
This specific office will be run by Vice President Kamala Harris, as well as other advocates and leaders.
My cousin was shot and killed by someone who never should have had a gun, whose own family didn't want him to have a gun.
In the video, Wilcox outlines the core missions of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. He emphasizes two primary objectives: the implementation of historic executive actions and the pursuit of new executive actions that are both within legal boundaries. These actions are central to the White House's strategy for addressing gun violence. The use of executive actions, a tool in the president's arsenal, allows for swift policy changes and measures without the need for congressional approval. This approach has been a point of contention in the broader debate about the balance of power between the executive and legislative branches. The overarching mission of the office, as articulated by Wilcox, is to address gun violence comprehensively. This includes focusing on strategies to reduce gun-related incidents and promote safety while respecting the legal framework that governs such actions. The video's message conveys a strong commitment to saving lives, investing in communities, and ensuring that individuals in crisis who pose a risk to themselves or others do not have unfettered access to firearms. A critique of the video's presentation and language. The video's presentation and language have come under scrutiny, particularly from critics who argue that it employs a variety of cinematic techniques that create an overly optimistic and engaging atmosphere. These techniques, while effective in terms of engaging viewers, have been perceived as a means of diverting attention from the potential concerns associated with the objectives of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. The use of dynamic and hopeful music in the video is a notable aspect of its presentation. This choice of music is intended to evoke positive emotions and a sense of hope. However, critics view this as an attempt to manipulate the audience's emotions and create a false sense of optimism.
Dynamic. You've got this upbeat music, this hopeful music. You've got amazing lighting. You've got a black environment. It's all about the message.
That are trying to change the gun laws in this country, and it's basically to help enforce the existing gun laws.
It's been abused like they abuse everything else because they utilize the language and they use the executive branch to interpret that language in a different way than it was passed.
While it is common to use music to set the tone in videos, the critics contend that in this case, it is employed to downplay the gravity of the issues at hand, such as gun violence and potential infringements on Second Amendment rights. Carefully chosen lighting is another element that detractors have pointed out. The lighting in the video is designed to create a visually appealing and hopeful atmosphere. Critics argue that this deliberate choice of lighting serves to create a specific mood and convey a message of optimism, potentially obscuring the controversial nature of the office's mission. By glossing over the more contentious aspects, the lighting is seen as an attempt to minimize concerns. Additionally, the video employs multiple camera angles to maintain viewer engagement. These varied perspectives keep the audience visually engaged with the content, making it more accessible and dynamic. Critics, however, argue that this approach keeps the viewer's focus on the presentation style and away from the substance of the message. It is seen as a technique that distracts from the key concerns and implications of the office's mission. The video's language has also been a subject of criticism. Detractors argue that the video employs vague and euphemistic language that makes it challenging to fully understand the implications of the proposed actions. The use of euphemisms and overly positive language is perceived as an attempt to obscure the true nature of the office's objectives. Critics contend that this style of language fails to address the seriousness and potential consequences of the actions being pursued. Concerns about red flag laws. The video's mention of preventing individuals in crisis from accessing firearms has raised concerns, particularly among critics who believe that this concept aligns with the controversial red flag laws. Red flag laws, officially known as Extreme Risk Protection Orders or ERPOs, permit the temporary confiscation of an individual's firearms if they are deemed a risk to themselves or others. While proponents argue that red flag laws serve as a preventive measure to reduce gun violence and protect individuals in crisis, critics argue that they pose significant challenges to constitutional rights, especially those protected by the Second Amendment.
Now, the things that he said, people in crisis don't have access to guns. Well, what that means is red flag laws.
Thinking about making sure that people in crisis who are a risk to themselves or others don't have access to firearms.
Expounding upon red flag laws, which are unconstitutional. Flat out.
One of the central concerns raised by critics is that red flag laws allow for the seizure of firearms without a proper legal process. Under these laws, a concerned individual, often a family member, law enforcement officer, or mental health professional can petition the court to issue an ERPO, effectively removing an individual's right to possess firearms temporarily. The legal process involved in issuing these orders is often expedited, and due process protections may be limited. Critics argue that this bypasses fundamental legal principles, including the presumption of innocence and the right to a fair and timely hearing before any deprivation of property. Second Amendment rights are at the core of the debate surrounding red flag laws. Critics assert that these laws infringe on the right to keep and bear arms, as they can lead to the confiscation of firearms without clear evidence of criminal activity. The perceived potential for abuse in implementing red flag laws is a source of concern for those who view the Second Amendment as a fundamental and constitutionally protected right. The debate centers on finding the balance between addressing the risk of gun violence and preserving individual liberties. While the video does not explicitly state that red flag laws will be a part of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention's approach, the mere mention of preventing individuals in crisis from accessing firearms has raised alarms among those who are already skeptical of these laws. The concern is that the office's commitment to implementing executive actions may involve an expansion of such laws at the federal level. The controversy surrounding the integration of gun control advocacy groups, notably Everytown for Gun Safety, with the federal government, as depicted in the video, has ignited a fierce and complex debate. Critics argue that this perceived alliance between advocacy groups and the White House and executive branch raises constitutional and legislative concerns. They are troubled by the implications of such close cooperation and influence. At the heart of this debate are concerns about the separation of powers and the balance between government branches. Critics fear that integrating advocacy groups into the federal government may undermine the principle of an impartial and unbiased government, as these groups often have specific policy agendas. The alignment between advocacy organizations and government officials prompts concerns about the transparency and accountability of the decision-making processes, as these organizations may push for policies that do not align with the broader public's interests. Questions arise regarding how gun control policies will be developed and enforced in such an environment. Critics argue that policies developed in collaboration with advocacy groups may be more influenced by political or ideological considerations than by a balanced approach that respects the rights of gun owners. The integration's potential to infringe on individual rights and liberties, particularly those protected by the Second Amendment, is another contentious point in this debate. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.